Okay, I've got a nice problem here, and I thought I would use it to go through the journal entries for it. And I'll go through them, but I don't know about it. I'll promise I'm not going to ask this on an exam. That's a fact. But let's just look here. This Rotations Corporation is a manufacturer of centrifuges, and they've got a fixed manufacturing overhead, and it's allocated using budgeted assembly hours. And budgeted assembly time is 2 hours per unit. Okay, so the following table shows budgeted amounts and actual amounts. So here's our actual, and there's the static budget, number of centrifuges, hours of assembly time, manufacturing overhead costs per hour. The static budget is 31. Actual variable manufacturing overhead costs were 12,693. Okay, so that's our actual. And fixed manufacturing overhead cost was 15,510 actual, and there's the budget for 14,1. And I think what I did here was I did variable and fixed for the variances. So let's look at those. Maybe I'll put this here. I can refer to them. It's a little tricky, but so here's the headings. We've got here's actual, okay, which is good, and there's actual times the budgeted rate. And the difference between actual and actual times the budgeted rate gives us the spending variance. Sorry. So, a minute. Yeah, spending variance. You have 417, and it's unfavorable because the actual was higher than what the budgeted rate would have been. Okay. The quantity is the same here, but we're looking at a different rate. So now the next is flexible, and it's the flexible budget, and that's budget for the actual output, right? So we have 220 centrifuges, and they take 2 hours per centrifuge. Okay, so that's our quantity. So 220 would be our budgeted quantity. That's the actual quantity times the budgeted hours per unit. So 220 times 2 times 31 is our budgeted rate. Okay, it's that 31 right there. That's the budgeted rate. So the difference between that and the actual times the budgeted rate is our efficiency variance, and that's 1364. And what is it? Is it favorable or unfavorable? It would be unfavorable, I believe. No, it's favorable. 1364 favorable. Yeah. Okay. And then what's been allocated is exactly what this is, so there's never any difference between these two. Okay, it's not applicable. Not sure why it's out there, but that's where it is. The total of the spending in the efficiency variance is the flexible budget. Okay, and the flexible budget variance it should be 947, and that's favorable. Okay, it's just the difference between these two. Nothing here. And then the difference between actual and what's been allocated, which is actually this flexible budget one, is the over allocated variable overhead. And that's the variance is 947 favorable. And that's just the difference between 12,693 and this 13,640, what's been allocated. Okay. There's something I was going to tell you here, and I don't know what it was. Well, let's move on to the fixed. Okay, for fixed, we've got actual first, and they gave us that number. That's the 15,510 from here. The static lump sum, that's a normal static budget for fixed overhead, and that's the 14,100 here. The difference between the actual and the static lump sum is the spending variance. And that's 1410 unfavorable because we spent more than what was in the budget, and that's spending. Okay, then the static lump sum becomes flexible. I have to figure this out. I'm really not sure why all this exists. why, I don't get it, but 14.1, and the difference between that and the actual output times the budgeted rate and the budgeted number of hours per unit, okay, so that's the 220 times 2. Our budgeted rate is 47. I don't have that calculated here. Anyways, it's 280,000 or 20,680. So the difference between the 14.1 and the 2680 is 6580, and that is our production variance. And it's a favorable variance, 6580 favorable. And I think the way to look at it is that you got more production out of what you budgeted. Okay, that's one way to look at that. Okay, because don't forget this is fixed. So 6580, favorable production volume variance. So in our fixed costs, for fixed overhead variances rather, we have flexible, these total the flexible budget plus the production volume variance. That whole thing is over allocated fixed overhead. I guess that's why it's favorable, We allocated 20,680, all right, but we only had 15,510 of actual overhead, so it's over allocated. And it would be a favorable variance. All right. Now the one thing I do like about this problem is this variance summary. So we have we've got spending, efficiency, and production volume. And for variable overhead, we're really looking at spending and efficiency variance. There's never any production variance with variable manufacturing overhead. It makes sense because it's variable, okay? So you never have production volume overhead. So 1417 unfavorable, 1364 favorable. Then with the fixed overhead, we've got flexible budget variance, 1410, but we don't have any efficiency variance. Okay, there's no efficiency variance here, but we do have production volume variance, and that's the 6580. Okay, and that's the difference between, where are we for the 6580? These two, you know what I mean, the two up above. Okay, so this is a nice summary here. Now, if you feel really brave, let's take a look at the journal entries, and I tried to make, I don't know, they set up extra accounts here that I don't really understand. But the first entry, the first thing we've got is to record the variable overhead cost incurred. So 12,693 was our actual cost. Okay, so I put it down here in a T account, and we've got 12,693 actual. The credit goes to a payable, so I just left that out. Okay, the next one is to record the cost allocated. Okay, we can do that. So it comes out of work in process, or it goes into work in process, and then it comes out of, I don't like this account here. I don't like this allocated account. So what I did, to me, it should just come out of work in process control. Okay, in other words, like you've got 12,693 in there. These are actual numbers, okay? Actual numbers for any kind of an overhead account. And then we just took 13,640 out and allocated it to a job. It went into work in process. Okay, so I would say this is like variable overhead control here. Or just variable overhead, Okay, now the next one is the mystery entry. And this is, supposedly, this is the right out of the text, out of the answer key. They say to isolate variances. Okay, so we debit this variable overhead again, bring the 13,640 back in. Okay, record the spending variance of 1470 or 1417. Reduce the control by the original costs that we put in, 12,693, and then record a variable overhead efficiency variance of 1364. Okay, then eventually close the variance to cost of goods sold. So this is the mystery one, is what's happening in variable overhead. So this is our actual cost. This is actual. The 13,640 is the what we allocated out. Okay, then we bring this back in again and take out the beginning balance. So now this variable overhead control is 0. Okay, work in process control has the 13,640 in it. What happens? We brought the spending, well, the spending variance was in with the mystery entry, and the variable overhead efficiency variance went in with the mystery entry. Okay, this is the third entry. And then finally, we take them out of, what do we do? The last one, we empty out the efficiency variance with the debit here. We empty out the spending variance with the credit here, and just dump the balance or plug it into cost of goods sold. 947. This part I understand, but this is pretty fancy going on in here. I don't quite understand. I guess you have to get rid of it. I mean, this has to go to 0. So I guess this is the idea. Yeah, maybe we really do need to use this allocated account. Maybe it would look clearer. If it does, I'll add an addendum to this presentation, but right now, this is how it is. Maybe so. Okay. The first part of this is good, though. The first part, I just thought you might want to see this because you got to read about it, but this part is a nice summary. This is a good summary of the variable and the fixed overhead analysis. For some reason, it looks clean to me. It looks simple. And the other thing I like a lot is this summary down here. Okay.